Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here to talk about, I think, one of the most important subjects that Central Pierce really has to talk about. And it's really something that impacts all of us, and in particularly you. I know there's great interest about 4 Platoon, and I thought we would go into detail about that today. That's only to get your attention. We're actually here to talk about the strategic plan. It's even funner, right? Anyway, thanks for tuning in and watching this. We are here to talk about the strategic plan. 4 Platoon just seemed like a way maybe I could get someone's attention. Last time we had Chief Carnes and Chief Stevie here talking about something that people were very interested in, and I get to come here and talk about strategic plan that I hope there's the same amount of interest. I know from an administrative level there certainly is. So as we walk through this, I wanted to address just a couple of the logistics. One of them in particular is please ask questions. If you have a question about something, what we're going to do is we're going to keep those questions and then we'll answer them at the end. Just because there's this 30-second delay, I can't even figure out what all that means, right? So it just seems to be best to me, we'll wait until the very end to answer all the questions. But please, if you have a question, type it out now. Secondly, I'm not here anonymous, and so questions aren't going to be anonymous. If you have a question, I want you to put your name and then put your question, and then when they're announced, they'll be announced in that same order. I just think that's good transparency for all of us. So what is a strategic plan? If you look back at time, classically organizations do not look strategically. Especially fire departments. And it goes back to our very culture and our core of who and what we are. We respond to emergencies. Responding to emergencies is tactical in nature, actually even task level. It's not strategic, and yet that is how we're trained. That's where our comfort level is. But we have a great failure if we don't look out 5 to 10 years and say, what should we be looking like? Being real and being willing to say, what are our weaknesses? And then based upon where we think we want to go, our actual weaknesses, our opportunities and other threats, we formulate a plan that is going to take us into our future. And that's what a strategic plan is. It really is those bigger picture goals that need to be accomplished over a strategic period of time, 5 or 10 years. It's not what are we going to do today, what are we going to do this year even, although you have to have a tactical plan, and we call that our operational plan. Our 2020 operational plan is actually going on the info portal this week. We have accomplished it, but the strategic plan is really set out for those visionary things, those things that we can identify so that when the future arrives, we're better prepared to land with it. I also think that General Eisenhower had a lot of wisdom and insight when he said the war plan for D-Day got them to the beaches, and then they had to scrap it and create a new plan. And the reality is we're planning to take that strategic step. When you're looking out 5 or 10 years, it's never perfect, but it does allow us on certain issues to get ahead of the game and to address those things that are going to keep us from becoming really what we can become. And so a strategic plan guides us this way, and we take this strategic plan extremely seriously. And from an administrative perspective, it's very powerful for me as the chief to have a strategic plan because it really gives me marching orders. Where do we need to go? What are the budget priorities? And when we implement it on an annual basis in our operational plan, where does the strategic planning components fit in? They have to be number one. They have to be the things that we're willing to address and move forward with. The other thing, unfortunately, about strategic planning type items, they're not items that are usually solved easily. If they were solved easily, then we probably already would have resolved them. They're challenging things. They're things that are supposed to be real. A strategic plan, I mentioned earlier, this SWOT analysis, that's not supposed to be a SWOT analysis that really hides the real problems. It's supposed to be a SWOT analysis that addresses them. Now, addressing them is challenging, of course. And that's the reason why in our process that we went through to establish a strategic plan, we use people from all levels of the organization so that we would have balance of perspective. Because I certainly have a perspective as the chief, but I don't have the perspective of the firefighters, paramedics, lieutenants, captains, battalion chiefs, assistant chiefs, deputy chiefs. And we wanted to make sure that that full enrichment, right, would occur as we looked at the SWOT, what people said about us, and then said, what are the most important things? What are real issues that we need to attend? What, unfortunately, what may be some perspectives of a few that just aren't validated enough for us to move forward with. Because when you do, a survey, you're going to get a lot of people's opinions, and we do it for that. There are certain times when some of those opinions are on the fringe, and they aren't validated by a large majority, but are bringing forward an issue. We look at those issues, we attend to them from a perspective of what is the validity of this. And we did that, with firefighters, paramedics, lieutenants, captains, battalion chiefs, on and on there, to make sure that we had balance and that we weren't trying to hide something. That's always the conspiracy theory, right? Well, I brought it forward, but the chief hid it. We laid her out pretty good, and that's our commitment, and we have to, because we have to be real. And that really, our process of developing the strategic plan, that was the process that we went through. It was a healthy process. It was one that I think brought forward the major issues that we'll hit in just a little bit. Once we had the strategic plan established, we developed a very similar process to implement the strategic plan. We really wanted it to be so that the firefighter, from the firefighter up, can bring forward issues and concerns that are real and prioritized. And we wanted to do the same thing in the implementation of that. So we used the same people that developed the plan, and we created a strategic planning committee and broke a bunch of things into goals and task managers and subgroups that would be managing and be responsible to complete the strategic plan. And so today we have a very functional strategic plan because of that group and the work that they've done for us. It's well organized. It's at a place of which we can track it. I just looked on the info portal. The plan is there. The status of the initiatives is there. It's all available for you to keep up with as we move forward. And I stress that to you because this is what we're doing. This is where we're going. If there's a question of, what's the vision of the fire department? Or what's the vision of the fire chief? What is the direction of the fire chief? Go read the strategic plan. Go look at what we're doing, because that is the vision. That is the direction that we're going. And I, as the fire chief, it's my responsibility to execute it. Do I agree with everything with every emphasis? Of course not. But we collectively did. And there's an incredible amount of power when we collectively do that, because this can't be my strategic plan. It actually has to be our strategic plan. And so that's the adventure that we're into, and we're working it hard. So the last part about the organization and the process that we went through is that we're also doing an annual evaluation. So the company that oversaw and developed our strategic plan, they come back on an annual basis and they review what we've accomplished, where we didn't accomplish objectives, what's our plan moving forward, and then they report that in a written report to the fire commissioners so they know how we're progressing with the strategic plan. That was something that was important to me because I had heard over and again, oh, we're going to do a strategic plan again. Oh, that'll look nice on top of the 3 others that have dust on them and that aren't being utilized. It was important to me that there was some accountability and that all of us knew that we were going to do this. This is the direction that we're going. And I'll tell you, one of the major things that are important to me about a strategic plan is the concept that we embrace the process, that we embrace that we need strategy. We can't just live on a task level and reacting to things that have come up that are predictable and could have been planned, and if they were planned, they wouldn't have caused a crisis. That's what strategic planning should be doing for us. And my hope was, as we implement this, and as we're steady with it, that the organization, when the next time for strategic planning comes, which I would suggest comes in 2 years when I leave. When I retire, the next chief needs to step into that next strategic planning process and saying, what are our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats? What are the things that are out there now, and how do we need to address those for our future? This should be an ongoing process, again, from the firefighters, the mechanics, the office staff, up through the fire chief, engage in a deliberate dialogue about Central Pierce and for its future, because that's what we're here for. My role here is a short period of time. I'll have been here for 5 years total, but my role is to take Central Pierce and lead it into its future, really from the information and the direction of the strategic plan. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. So that's what's important to me, is that we all get this concept of its importance and that we don't let it go. The worst thing that Central Pierce can do is say, yeah, that was interesting. What was that over there we got to go do? What was that? And leave a proactiveness and go back to a reactiveness, because that will cost you and you'll end up in a place that you don't want to be. Strategic planning allows you to identify the target and then hit the target and knowing where you want to go. Again, I want to stress access to it on the info portal. A lot of good information there. So the plan itself, of course, starts off with, what is the organization's mission, vision, and values? And I just wanted to read the concept of a mission. I've in the Fire Chief Update do talk about mission, and I'll give some definition to it, but ESCI's definition I think is very good. It says the organization's mission statement should clearly define the primary purpose of the organization's existence. It focuses fire department members on what is truly important to the organization and community. The mission statement should be understood by all members and posted prominently throughout the organization's facilities. Each member should commit the mission to memory. So when you don't know what to do, or you're wondering what we should be doing, that the mission is where we go. Effectively respond, continuously improve, compassionately serve. And you've heard my thoughts, my philosophies, my considerations of that as it applies to you, as it applies to me. But I can't tell you, that mission is us, and that's where we have to focus. And again, I look at a mission in many ways as if I'm in the fog and I'm a ship moving forward. I'm in dangerous waters where there's a lot of rocks around, it's choppy, I'm uncertain. A mission is really, it's the lighthouse. It's telling you where you are. It's telling you where you need to go. And that's what a mission should be doing for us, and I hope it's doing that for you. If you haven't memorized it, we need to memorize it. We need to be thinking about it as we come to work, because that's really what we all need to be doing. Secondly, it comes to the vision. Our vision statements are very powerful as you walk through them, and I'm not going to read them to you, but it's really, what we said was, if we were to look at where we wanted to be and what we wanted to be, how do we put words to that? That's what the vision did for us. It helped us express that, and in some very tangible ways, about what Central Pierce needed to look like into its future. And so the vision is incredibly important, because it kind of sets the foundation also of everything else. Everything else that falls underneath it, right? The values and then our strategic goals all feed into that vision and hopefully accomplish our mission. Thirdly is our values. We spent quite a bit of time in the Fire Chief Update on our values. I can't express the need for us to become a values-driven organization. I can't express the dependency of our future upon that. We have to have some rules. There's no doubt about it. We live in a society of laws and rules. George Washington, I think, said it best, that no nation will ever be able to live by legislated rules and laws. We must be a nation that is based upon values, and that we have self-discipline according to our values, leading our lives. And if you think about that, it's the same in Central Pierce. If we think somehow we're going to create the rules of order that have to be enforced and maintained, then I get to be the cop of those rules of order. And inherently, I have to do that whenever we establish that. But a higher level, a bigger purpose, is to identify how should we be behaving, and corporately saying, this is what Central Pierce and how we should be treating each other, and this is how we should be treating our customer, this is how we should be treating our neighbors. And when we don't, we talk to one another about it. We first self-regulate, because no one's going to be perfect. And when you identify, hey, you know what, I didn't really live up to the person I want to be in that engagement, right? That we take ownership of it and simply own it and move ourselves forward, make the adjustment, the correction to live by our values. If it goes too far, let's say you don't do that kind of self-evaluation, and it becomes pretty apparent, what we need is people who are a part of the team and who are willing to say, hey, you know, I don't really think that really reflects the values of the organization. Or is that really achieving our mission and vision and values? It just didn't seem that way. Let's dialogue about that. And if we're a team really does that kind of work. A team doesn't, in a football analogy, allow the ball to drop onto the ground as a fumble and then point at who dropped it and blame them. They go after the ball. And we're all going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. Everyone is. And we all have weaknesses, and we have to live within that. And the only way we can be successful as an organization is that when we start living like a team and not blaming and not criticizing and not looking to find, but instead being a team member, getting focused on what is it we need to achieve today. And when we move along, and if we're kind of stepping outside of those things, maybe we're having a hard day and we're kind of snappy, a little angry real quick, maybe treating people not really reflecting what our values are. Having someone come alongside and say, hey, brother, sister, are you okay? Because you're not acting like you, and I think we're missing the mark a little here. And then you being willing to go, thank you, which is the hardest part, right? Because that requires humbleness. The fact that, wow, I'm not perfect, and sometimes I need a brother or sister to come along and say to me, hey, I care about you, man, but we're in this together, and we've got to be really conforming to these values in order to be successful, both for you individually and for our organization. That's what values is all about. And the only way they're successful is team. That's it. You can't on your own be successful. If you think you are and you think you can be, I think you'll see over time, and maybe a little more gray hair, that we need each other because we're humans, we make mistakes, and we need someone who cares about us to come alongside and to help us. And then we need to have a humbleness of heart in order to receive it. So our values are critical for us because, again, it gives us a construct. It creates, in many ways, the foundation, right, of our character, the foundation of our culture. That really is our values. And the question I would have for myself and for you is, who is it that you want to be? Who is it that you want Central Pierce to be? Because corporately, how you behave invades others, both positive or negative. And the corporation, the corporate culture, the heart of what Central Pierce is and becomes is so dependent upon each of us individually to say, I will submit, I will choose to take those values and live by them. And yes, I use the word submission because in the end, it's what we have to do. If we all said, no, I'm going to live by my values, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. If we don't have a corporate basis for that, then we don't have a culture. We have chaos. We have anarchy. We have things that are not going to be successful for us because we have to have a direction and focus. And so values are incredibly important to us. So I wanted to hit those bigger things within the strategic plan, but I also wanted to just touch base on the initiatives and just let you get a sense of some of the work that we're doing within them. I hope that I remember the majority of the issues. But so our initiative number one, and it was made number one because it was thought that unless we address this issue, Central Pierce will never meet its mission, vision, values, and become really what Central Pierce can be. And remember, we're not here for ourselves. That's the beauty of this work. We're actually here for our citizens. And they believe that we're doing this work for them, not for ourselves. We're engaged on the business at hand, not caught up in drama, not caught up in stirring the pot, not caught up in unproductive things, but we're there for productive things, to be constructive, to move issues forward for their benefit, because every one of us are here for their benefit. If we remove our citizens, we don't exist. We're here for them, right? So these initiatives were identified by the SWOT analysis and the surveying, and the first one was culture and communication. And culture was identified as the number one issue. The issue that if we don't address our culture and leave a toxicity that was present a couple years ago and move into a good, healthy, constructive relationships with one another and with our community, that is not a course that's going to be successful, and we could never attain what we're trying to accomplish. And so there's a culture and communication task group, and they are engaged on, okay, so what are these initiatives and how do we move them forward? A couple of them included some surveying that they did above and beyond the actual strategic planning surveys. And from it, they identified some issues that we need to address and attend. But it's very difficult when we are not organizational psychologists and we just don't have a full level of understanding of how to solve problems. We looked at them all and went, wow, what do we do next? But the good news was identification of a problem is 50%, right? We're heading in the right direction, and we took some steps. One was we have consulted with a group called Nash Consulting, who are starting in April. We're going to start with some training for battalion chief officers and up to first get the leadership group healthy. And then from there, we're going to start engaging with the rest of the organization on those principles. We're going to be teaching them at officer development. We're going to be talking about them and allowing them to then start to work within the organization. They're going to help us as we look out and say, where are we struggling? What are the things that we need to change and do? Where are the groups at that may need some additional attendance to? And they're going to help us walk through how do we become healthy. And interesting thing, the reason I was excited about Nash Consulting was they said, we're not here to inoculate you. You know, every year flu season comes around, and we're fortunate we have someone comes out and gives us an inoculation for the year, but it only lasts for that year. And a lot of times, I don't know if you noticed, but it isn't perfect, right? And you still get sick from the flu. They said, we don't want to be an inoculation because inoculations are hit and miss. You know, we need to be a part of your organization longer term. So we're going to be rolling out some initial training throughout the organization, but then they're going to be walking with us as we're struggling, as things are coming up, and consulting, because they are built upon best practices in social science about how the best organizations, how do they accomplish good culture, and again with the aim of accomplishing things for our citizens. So very excited about Nash Consulting. It took us a while to get there, to even realize that that's what we needed, but we need help. There's no doubt. I think if you look at an organization, if we were a healthy and an organization built upon trust, and that was across our organization deeply, I'm not talking 100%. There's no way we reach 100%. Not even a goal. But if we had that inherent trust in our organization, what would we accomplish? what would we actually do for our citizens? What would that focus do for our response delivery? Can you imagine that? We aren't struggling with drama. We're not following after rumors. We're not following after allegations. Instead, we're actually just focusing on why we're here. It's unbelievable what we could get accomplished. And we, I think, have that opportunity. And we'll see how it runs. I see Nash Consulting being here post me. I see them as a bridge that we're starting now. 22 months, hard to believe that I'll retire. And they will bridge us across that time period into the next leadership change and help us become what we need to be. Because me sitting in the seat actually isn't the important thing. What matters is our culture. Our culture is made up of all of us. And so Nash Consulting is a major component of the beginning of our culture work that we're doing. The second one was communications. How do we communicate better? Well, I'm sitting in front of this camera right now because of some of this work that was identified. We're also going out and reaching to stations. Most of our chiefs should be touching a station about once a week, and I know this is going to kill Brian Caldier. I'm still doing the written chiefs updates. Brian, he was not a big proponent of me doing that, but it's a way that I feel I can communicate rapidly, so and I think thoughtfully. Although sometimes I get in a hurry in doing it. So we're doing some things to try to communicate better, but we know we can do better. I just sat with the battalion chiefs, and it was amazing to me. They said, sometimes we feel like communications could be better. Oh, you're kidding me. How could that be? And so we know we got work to do. We want to communicate effectively. We want to make sure that everybody is informed and that we are inclusive where we can be inclusive, and that but that where we're going is clear for our organization, and we can always do better. And so we're starting to engage with the battalion chiefs on that, both in terms of, what portion, as we're trying to get healthy as an administration, now we're stepping with the battalion chiefs, what level of inclusiveness and involvement and what types of things do they want to be involved, should they be involved with, and then what items are we failing at when it comes to communications for them. It's my belief, I was a battalion chief for 10 years, when I was fully informed and I was involved with those things that impacted the response delivery system, I feel like I was empowered to step into the conversations, answer the questions, and engage. And so that's one of our steps that we're taking in the process. As we're moving along, I think we'll go to the next initiative, which is financial sustainability. I wanted to hit this because we haven't talked a lot about fire district finances. And in the future, I'll have a video stream very similar to this about fire district finance and the philosophical approaches that we're taking. But the real issue for Initiative 2 was financial sustainability. How do we forecast and look out and remain viable in the chop and the wind that occurs amongst a current, right? And I mean, even today, coronavirus, last time I checked, just before I started, the Dow's down 850 points, right? Who can predict that? How can we forecast and foreshadow with perfection? We can't. But what we can do is take a responsible methodology that makes sense, and we can forecast that out over a strategic period of time to make sure that we're viable and sustainable. I will admit, I am a conservative fire chief when it comes to sustainability, and Tanya, finance director, is very conservative. And so we're careful in our approaches. But the major issue that we do is we develop a set of assumptions that are based upon the economic future that we can foresee. We base it upon the actual historical expenses, and we bring that together and we create a 5-year plan that shows where we're going to land financially at 5 years. Now, I really think it's accurate probably for the first 2. After that, it's guessing, there's no doubt. But it's guessing within a range, right? We know the assumptions, And we know if the economy takes a left turn, right, that we've got to move that target with it. And it gives us the ability, I think, to follow and to keep up with what's changing and where things are going, because we will adjust it. Every year at our strategic planning workshop with the commissioners, we present that 5-year forecast. We also, that's the preparation of the budget process that's coming up. And let's just say coronavirus does go crazy. The Dow drops 20 points. We're starting to see it in AV. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to start adjusting our forecast because we have to act responsibly. So we're going to take course corrections as things move along. But again, it's a major initiative because one of the things that all of us need is financial stability. We don't need to have that worry of, whoa, that's happening now. Do I stop my job? Those aren't things, that is an unnecessary level of drama that we want to not have in our organization. So that's how we approach it. We also want to look at it holistically. So one of the items that we've worked on diligently over the last year is our capital facility plan. We did that. We knew that we would be working on a master plan, which would include all of the items in the capital facility plan. Of course, that was initiated because of the planning, the Pierce County planning functions that are occurring right now. But from that, we have a 20-year, we can see the 20-year capital liability, and we have a funding plan that addresses that. And again, that's a completely different level of detail that I'm able to go through today. Not really able to, it's more, if I cover that, we won't cover the rest of the strategic plan, which is our topic. So we're also looking at current and alternative revenue sources. So it's really smart, I think, for us to always be looking at where are opportunities for different types of revenue besides taxation. So we are always looking for that. The big one was, of course, GEMT. We probably won't see one like that again. I would be very surprised. But even smaller ones, right? We want to pursue them, whether it's grants, whether it's other areas, because in particular, revenue that can be predicted and is a revenue stream that has a long-term look, they become very valuable over time for us. So that's really the major issues on financial sustainability. Professional development, this was the concept that, which is Initiative 3, it's the concept that our people are really the most important thing in the organization. They're the ones providing the services. They're the ones getting things done, whether you're on the support services side or whether you're on the services delivery side. And I just wanted to say, by the way, it's interesting, right? Without support services, emergency services doesn't happen. And without emergency services, there's no reason for support services. So there's this kind of interdependency, right? We all depend upon one another, and again, reflecting that need for a team. But we need to develop our people. We don't have really clean direction for, hey, how do you, if you are a firefighter, how do you take that next step to this position? If you're a support specialist and you want to become an analyst, how do you do that, right? What does that look like? And so we're going to be developing that in particular this year. This year we're taking I think a significant step with regards to that future, because we're creating a succession plan. So we will go out to RFP and have an outside vendor come in and a consultant and help us create a succession plan. And a succession plan is basically, what are the positions that are moving, and then how do we fill them effectively with people that have the knowledge, skills, abilities, and credentialing to fill those positions. And so that's a major body of work to arrive at that. But it really will allow us to make sure that we're developing the workforce need that we will have for our future. And that is the purpose of a succession plan. And really for professional development, that is the major initiative that we have going on this year. Then Initiative 4 was prevention, education, and operations. We have a bunch of work here that we're doing this year. No doubt through the budget cycle you saw that we have a fire services planner and a public educator, both new positions dealing with these concepts of prevention education. And they're major steps for us in the future. I've never seen a fire district as large as we are not having a robust education component, public education component, with multiple people. We're taking a step with one to begin a process. We're also trying to take a new angle with it, and it's really a concept called community risk reduction. It's where you look across, what are the risks within your community, and from those risks, how do we mitigate them from an education standpoint, from an enforcement or code standard standpoint, those kinds of things, that holistic perspective, and then from a response standpoint. And community risk reduction is large in that way, and we're trying to move our organization towards that and being much more data-centered. One of the items that I hope to see in our 2021 budget is actually a comprehensive risk assessment of our organization, where we will do a real close look at risk. What is our number one EMS call? What's the risk of the volcano occurring, erupting, Mount Rainier, and then how do we deal with that? Are we prepared from a disaster preparedness perspective? Again, laying a foundation. Once we understand the problems, we can put the response system over it, and then we can start seeing our gaps, and then we can start working on those gaps. So it identifies that plan coming. It identifies a community-wide community prevention education programs that targets actual risks in communities. It also identifies our need to influence community planning. So we didn't know that the Centers and Corridors project was going to come, but the strategic plan clearly said we must be involved in community planning. We haven't been in the past. Things have been occurring that really we can't match our response system to, and so we need to begin influencing that process. Major body of work over the last year. I'm hoping that by this summer I'll be completed with the big part of that, and then the planner is going to be able to come in and maintain the work that we've accomplished. But it's a major body of work. We're never going to be able to step away from it. We have to be involved in community planning. And then the next item was the development of this district master plan. So we've been working that from a couple of angles. First was the capital facility plan, which deals with this concept that our community is changing. And it changes because of development and people coming in and the demographics that are here. And then what do we need capital-wise in order to meet that change in the community? And that's really what our capital facilities plan does. The second component of that is the EMS delivery analysis. So we're looking at our EMS delivery system, and we are creating a master plan for our EMS delivery system in order to identify where our weaknesses, what are the best practices that are out there today, and it is thorough. In fact, I'm working on the final scope and negotiating it with the vendors, the vendor that we're looking at, to identify what level of work, and I am telling you it's fairly thorough. Will it be perfect? Well, I'm involved, so it can't be perfect, but it is a thorough analysis of what is our current state, what are best practices, and where do we need to go for the next 5 or 10 years. It's going to make a significant change, I think, in our EMS system, or it's going to validate what we're doing. I think it's going to be the first. I think we have issues in areas that we have to attend and address, and it's going to give us that opportunity to do that. From that, we'll be looking at those. We have a great team that's assembled, people from the EMS division. We have people from the task team, strategic planning task team, that are overseeing this initiative. We have Chief Stevie Carnes and myself, all involved in this to work with the vendor, moving this analysis forward. Once their recommendations come forward, that same team will vet them with members from Local 726, the administrative team, and vet the practical application of those. and then we'll match that with a financial plan and be bringing that to the board to start implementing. So some significant issues are occurring in those areas. Another initiative or goal that we have there is to develop and implement a fleet services businesses practice plan. So over the when I first got here, I was really difficult, but somehow I could see that our fleet wasn't in very good shape. I know, smart guy, right? I guess it was the truck that was broken down in front of me. I'm not sure, but we've pretty much addressed that. We have purchased a boatload of engines. We got a couple trucks coming. The medic units are coming up. I think our fleet is becoming very solid, and by the end of 2021, it'll be a very solid fleet. So we need to rethink and look at how should we be doing business, both in terms of capital fleet, but also in terms of how we maintain and how we see that longer term moving forward. And so we'll be looking at in I believe it's 21 or 22, doing some type of work where we look at that closely to grab again, just like we are with the EMS system, looking at our fleet system, how do we best do that with modern best practices? Okay, so that's really the Initiative 4. We'll go to Initiative 5, which is Marketing and Outreach. This deals with developing a comprehensive community outreach plan, number one. So Captain Shaw is actually presenting that to our Board of Commissioners at the next meeting. I believe it's the first one in March, which engages how are we going to communicate and re-engagement with our community. What we don't want to do is go out to our community because we have a financial issue on the ballot. We have to go out to our community then, but we need to have a relationship with our community and be engaged with our community and talking about our issues prior to that event. And so he has a plan that I think outlines strategically where we want to go. No doubt we're going to run it this year, and then we'll make adjustments the following year just to do it a little better each and every time. But it's going to require all of us to be out in our community, being visible, talking about the issues of the fire district. Second goal was to improve the district's media presence. You know, we got our shift PIOs finally deployed, and the Captain Shaw has been engaged on Facebook, etc. Our numbers are up. I think we're getting out a little better. We're going to continue to strive to do to really communicate in that way, as most people seem to be utilizing that. Improve roles and relationships with government agencies and entities. This is really more strategic at the chief officer level, where we're trying to be engaged on a countywide basis. We're doing that in various ways also. And then attain citizen support. So that deals with our communications plan. So our last initiative, we're getting through it. Kind of rough, eh? But it is important stuff because, again, it's where we're going. It's what we're doing, right? Did I mention 4 platoon? I got your attention again. Good. The last initiative is regionalization and cooperation. And from our SWOT analysis, we really identified that in the past we were leaders, both regionally and locally, and we lost that quite a bit through the last struggle, through the recession in particular. So we really felt like we need to start gaining that back. So we started wanting us to look at where can we find regional efficiencies? How can, through cooperation, can we achieve a better response delivery system? So we're working on that today. In fact, before the Board of Commissioners tonight is something that's more of a clarifying document, which is a mutual aid agreement with Fire District 14. As you know better than I do, Fire District 14 at one point was a part of Central Pierce. They chose to leave Central Pierce, but some of the issues were really not defined about what is our relationship now? What does that look like? What happens if they call us? There was this perspective that they had was if they called us, we just wouldn't even come. So I spent actually about 1.5 years working on this agreement to clarify it. So you'll see and hear about that agreement if the Board of Commissioners approve it in the near future. We're also looking at how we operate with our other partners and trying to bring some clarity on them, and then also looking at how we can create efficiencies. So Our IT partnerships continue to expand. We're currently working with Key Peninsula, Gig Harbor, and Graham, which we just expanded to, and now South Pierce is asking to be involved in that collaborative process. So we continue to work on these things that make sense for us to collaborate on, where there's value for all the parties. Let me look here. And then to increase Central Pierce Fire and Rescue's influence regionally, it's an area that we're really not doing a lot on right now, but it's part of the vision of what Central Pierce needs to become. The areas that we are influencing, things like the peer support process with Captain Jackson, bringing that forward regionally. I would say that the tactical athlete was another one. That's not even just regionally. That's exploding across the western part of Washington State. And so it's things like that that we're doing, and we're just trying to become involved. So we're attending association meetings. We're trying to bring our influence onto those, and we're being involved with the state legislature. We go down annually to speak to our legislature. We're also involved in other areas locally, politically, and so we're trying to engage within our community. So those are the major issues that we're trying to attend to with our strategic plan, and really the influence that it has about the direction of our organization and our future. So that was really the stuff that I needed to say, and so I just wanted to take a moment and say, do we have some questions? We don't have any questions. Now, I just got to ask, now how is it that the aid units had 40 questions, and strategic planning, I mentioned 4 platoon, didn't I? These guys told me if I mentioned 4 platoon, I would get some questions, but no, I understand. I hope that you at least understand where the organization's going, where my mind is at. I am not a tactically deployed fire chief. I try to be a strategically deployed fire chief. We need to be looking out that 5 and 10 years for us to better land where we need to be to serve our citizens. Lastly, I would just say this. We all really need to embrace this concept of our values and our culture. If there's anything that's going to make a difference, it's you as an individual saying, I am going to self-regulate. I am going to choose the values of Central Pierce. I'm going to live by its mission because it's the right thing to do. And I can't force you to do that. I can appeal to you. I can say, this is what we need. And then you've got to make the choice to intentionally do that. I also want to reinforce this concept that the only way we're successful, the only way I'll be successful, is when I have a team around me that says, hey, Chief, you actually spoke a little harshly to that person. It seemed like you were kind of condescending. You were a little bit arrogant when you were speaking to them. That's the only time. If we can have that environment, where we'll really arrive and find success. So thank you for your time. Be safe. It sounds like we might have a question.
Do you want to take a 7-2 question?
I'll take any question.
All right, Chief. Ed Rivnick, Station 69, would like to know, when does Station 72 open? What will the new response areas for 71, 72, 69 look like? And how will 72 handle the call volume of 66 and 72? So
very complex tactical level discussion, a request for information. The specific response zones have been established, but I don't have that specific information with me. I think the best answer to that would be to have Chief Stevie come back and actually address that, because it's a tactical level discussion that I think needs to be addressed. Ed, if you still have those questions, I certainly think others probably have that questions. We have the answers to them. The one item about how will the new 7.2 handle the call volume, I think I can address that. If you look at the number of assets that are in play today to cover that call volume, we're actually adding an additional asset with the low acuity BLS units. So if the current assets are not covering it adequately, then certainly the new aid unit is going to help that. But there's going to be no difference in those ways. Usually the concern in question is the moving it onto the corridor and not so much the number of assets. The question is, of course, when you move a fire station, there's always winners and losers. There's always an enhanced service level, and there's always a decrease in service level. And so regardless of how you do that, that always happens when you move a station, and that's going to happen here. What we do know is where our call volume. I just looked at it again just to confirm it, and we have a solid platform of our call volume is along that corridor, and we expect that to continue. The one thing we have a gap in, we think, and our capital facility plan addresses that, is probably in the middle between 6.9 and 7.2, an area around 1/40th. And so the capital facility plan identifies that we probably need to create a new 6.6 and place it there. So we're actually looking at bringing some proposals forward at our strategic planning workshop with the Board of Commissioners to look at how we might accomplish that, because property is just not getting cheaper, it's getting more expensive, and what other alternatives we might have moving it forward. So the tactical level, I think I'm going to leave that for Chief Stevie. The strategic level, when I look at it from a response system, same number of assets, one additional. So if we have problems today, we're probably still going to have some problems. We're going to add the low acuity unit into that station. Hopefully that'll pick up some of the work. Any other questions?
No, it was just another question based off of what you just answered. The increase of call volumes with the baby boomer generation, and how it's going to keep increasing along that corridor specifically.
Yeah.
Was a concern that was brought up after that.
By who?
By Ed.
Okay. Did everybody catch the question?
There was one follow-up question on that note, specifically talking about the increasing call volume over the next 5 years based on the rate of aging baby boomers. How are we going to deal with all of those extra calls, specifically along that corridor?
Yeah. So great question. We do know that the people calling it, I think, the gray tsunami. By the way, I'm a part of that. I'm on the very end of it. And we're just starting to see its impact moving in. We know that obviously there's going to be continued pressure on the response system, in particular in the areas of EMS. That is that's how that is going to be impacted, and probably a lot of low acuity EMS. And I agree with Ed that guess where most of those care centers are going? It seems like every day they're breaking ground on a new one, and they have a tendency to produce call volume because these people who have paid taxes all their lives are now getting elderly. And when you get elderly, you have a tendency to get sick. My sister, and she's an anesthesiologist at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, she told me a couple of years ago that your last year of life to 2 years, you'll spend 80% of your health care costs. So we know that's coming, and we know that they're going to need services to address their physical needs. It's an honor and pleasure, and I want to stress this. These people paid taxes their entire life, doesn't matter where. It is our honor to serve the elderly. If we have a culture that doesn't look at it that way, and I'm talking broadly, we're in trouble. That's a culture that's not sustainable. So, but how do we address it is really the question. It's one of those things, our capital facility plan has addressed some of that by realizing where call densities are going to come in. They looked at call volume based upon the actual land use. So land use determines what can actually be built, and based upon land use and types of facilities, call volume projections were created. We're also going to look at that again when we look at our EMS systems analysis, which is going to say what's coming and what's the demand, what is the type of demand, what kinds of and levels of service based upon acuity. So the acuity of the calls that are coming, we're going to look back on the past, project it forward, which, by the way, low acuity and BLS calls are the double-digit inflation for Central Pierce. our actual time life critical medical events are increasing about the same rate as fires, a little faster, but not much, 1.5%, 2% per year, where the low acuity BLS call volume is increasing double digits, right? Basically every year. We had a year it dropped to 8%. Again, we've been up to 12. I think in 18 we were at 12. So we're going to be looking at that with our EMS systems analysis and seeing, what are our best and options to move forward with how we address that. I think it's a reality. Again, measuring its impact and understanding its impact is going to be the challenge. Go ahead. All right, so again, thank you for questions. Thank you for listening today. I know it had to be a challenge, just the dryness of strategic plan, and yet, again, it's where we're going, so I appreciate your time. Thank you.